It's gonna be like
This is Aunt Viv.
that we don't know.
Aunt Viv Golbus.
Uncle Mickey.
I got
All Golbus is here. Uncle Glenn, Aunt Tony, Brenda, Grandma. Okay.
Yawn, Nick.
So the story is back in probably the Ukraine, we're not sure where, and we're in the 1800s, and there's these two cousins who were training for their bar mitzvah, so they're 11, 12, and they have to go over the hill to the next village, next shtetl, to get their training. So they go over, they're getting their training. As they come back that night, they get to the top of the hill, and their village is all in flames. The Cossacks have come and have wiped out the village and are burning it. It's a pogrom. So the two boys run into the forest and hide in the forest. And they spent the next months eating berries and hiding, and finally they can't do it anymore. And they hear a peddler coming along on his cart, and he's singing in Yiddish. So they figure it's safe, and they come out and tell him the story. He takes them home with him and to raise them. And one of them marries his daughter. And that's the start of the kite line. That's as far back as we can go, and why we can't go any further back in the kite line, which is, let me figure out where it is to you. Your grandmother's grandmother?
Yeah.
I think we're like at the great
Rose Golbus.
grandmother.
Yeah, Rose Golbus is.
Their great grandmother's grandmother.
And
So
actually,
three greats.
that sister was named Sippy, and one of your great grandmother, our grandmother Rose, or our mother Rose Klein, her oldest sister was named Sippy. After that, 2 generations before Sippy, and that's so the Klein pedigree only goes back about 5 generations, and it stops there because of the pogrom. We don't know anything from before that. Nobody knew the story, and Sylvia Sippy knew it, and when she was quite old, she called me in and said, I have to tell you a story, because I don't want it to die with me. And that was the first time I'd ever heard it.
Now there's another
So-
story.
That weed.
Okay, so you didn't grow up.
I never heard anything. No, don't tell him. He
What did
doesn't
each
know.
generation?
The, so your great-grandfather, my father, his mother was Mary Nimitz, who had emigrated from England. We don't know anything about her family, because what I knew of my father's family, your great-grandfather's family,
And the
was
name is Leonard.
3 boys. So it was Frank, Danny, and Leonard.
Golbus.
And Golbus is, and Leonard is your great-grandfather. And she died when the boys were young, like 7, 8, 9 kind of thing. They were only a few years apart. The story that we were told is that there were 3 boys before that had died before she ever had Frank, so that there was a set of 3 and then a set of 3. Whether or not that's true, I'm not quite sure, in all honesty. He dressed as a girl
For how many years?
because, I don't know, because he was the 4th boy and they'd lost 3.
Right.
So they were gonna hide the fact that he was a boy from God. They weren't gonna let God know that he was a boy.
It evidently
Yeah.
worked.
They were.
She made it.
He's, right. So that one came without any,
Fact checking.
fact check.
Fake news.
But they came to this country much earlier.
Much earlier, Nick.
Who's?
One of them was born in this country, your great-grandfather.
Everybody was born here, well, not everybody. Two of my grandparents, which would have been your great-greats, I guess, were born, Mary Nimitz was born, she was Malka, which means queen. Malka Nimitz was born in England, which means her people came from somewhere else, because the Jews had been expelled from England and then allowed back in. So we don't know where they came from. We don't know anything about that side of the family. And then Grandma Kite, who became Grandma Klein, for me, my grandma, your great-great, was born in Riga, in Latvia. And she came over, she had one older sister, and she were born in Latvia. The family immigrated in like 1902 or something, and then had 7 or 8 more kids. Big family.
Yeah. But Reuben was born here, wasn't he?
Yes. Both grandfathers, both my grandfathers, your great-greats, were born here.
And I have a family tree with all this on it that I'm giving you have already.
He's in the Klein family, which is my mom's family. And he must be close to 90.
He was.
And he said, the Klein family, now we're talking about my mom's father's side, the Kites married into the Kleins. On the Klein side, they came from Prešov, Slovakia now. It was Czechoslovakia, but it's Slovakia
At the
now.
time.
It's way over towards the Polish border. And in fact, when Mom found out how close it was to the Polish border, she said that we couldn't tell Polish jokes anymore. It was too close for comfort.
They're like, what's a Polish joke?
They know Polish jokes.
I should.
So Harold called.
We say Southern jokes down here. Is that better?
Called and said, you travel all over, I want you to do something for me. I want to go to Israel, and I want to have a reunion, because what happened to the Prešov families is, in the 1800s, a whole ship started coming over, and they would save up some money, then send back for some more. Okay?
And they came to Yonkers.
They came originally to Yonkers, New York, and the family is still in Yonkers, New York. Big clan there. And the women went to work in the
Textile industry,
making clothes on sewing machines and all. What we always call sweatshops.
Yeah.
And one of the brothers came and looked and said, I'm not bringing my wife and daughters over to work in the textile. We're staying. And they stayed, that whole side of the family mostly got wiped out in the Holocaust. But there are 2 homes right next to each other, right next to the synagogue at Prešov, that were Klein families. So the kids were cousins of one another. And about 4 of them survived Auschwitz and were essentially teenagers and late teenagers when the war ended. A number went to, well, 2 of them, not a number, two ladies young girls, went to Israel and remade their lives. They ended up married with kids, grandkids, and we met them in Israel.
Yeah.
And others in that generation,
2 of them, one went to Australia.
one of them went right away, and one was so sick she was in a
DP camp.
DP camp hospital for a couple of years after the war. When they finally were ready to release her, this was in Italy, when they finally were ready to release her, she would have gone to Israel to join her cousins, but Israel was about to have a war. And she said, I can't go to another war. She got on, teenage girl, got on a boat alone and went to Australia.
It says we eventually met
No,
there.
Magda is, so
Magda's still in.
Magda was she's now passed, but
Yeah.
she was a survivor, and her family, her parents, she was in Auschwitz, and with the cousins that went to Israel. But her parents were in the forest fighting with the partisans against the Nazis. So when the war ended, the reward for having fought with the partisans and all was things like she had, free passes on the trains and buses for life and kind of thing like that. So she stayed. Her parents had fought and came back. She stayed in Prussia. And what Harold said to me is, I want you to go get Magda.
Take her for this reunion in
Bring her to
Israel.
Israel.
And we happen to have a connection. The Consul General in San Francisco was an Israeli who became friendly with us. And Mickey said to him, when you can talk, take over, Mick.
Well, first I contacted her through a mate from medicine
He was in Czechoslovakia.
at the university
Yeah.
in Prague. I said to him, tell her there's a meeting in Austria, in Vienna, because that only country that they could come to from Czechoslovakia was Austria, because it was neutral. Czechoslovakia is part of the communist bloc. I said to her, do you want to come and meet me there? And, we knew we were cousins kind of thing. And so she said yes. And then I sent a message through him, which I couldn't send directly to her, to say, there is no meeting in Vienna. If you want to meet me in Vienna, I'll take you to Israel to see the two cousins you haven't seen since you were let out of Auschwitz. And so she wanted to do that.
Yeah.
Wow.
So we flew to Austria, to Vienna, stayed overnight. So I went she was coming in by bus. So I had sent her a picture and she had sent me a picture. So I'm walking to the bus station with this picture in front of me, and she gets off the bus with a picture in front of her, and we found each other. And we had, the only language we had in common was a little bit of German, because we had been stationed in Germany in the military, and everybody learned German in Auschwitz, unfortunately. And Yaki had arranged, this
The Israeli
Israeli consul from San Francisco, had arranged, we went to the airport in Vienna the next day, and I went up to the El Al counter and said, I'm bringing somebody from Czechoslovakia who we couldn't, of course, doesn't have a visa or any
Yeah,
permission.
you couldn't stamp our
And you can't
passport.
stamp the passport or anything. And they just said to me, oh, we know all about it, no problem. Took us on the plane, and we had been told when we get off the plane, instead of going through the customs line and everything, we went to the office, and again, I said, I'm bringing something, and a voice from the back says, I know about it, and came out, and she was brought in. Great reunion. Their language was Hungarian at home. When we grew up, Grandpa Klein, my Grandpa Klein, your great-great, always told us that they were Hungarian. What he really meant is that they spoke Hungarian at home. They were part of the Austro-Hungarian Empire, and it was much greater status to be part of the empire than to be Czechoslovakian. So he never told us that Prussia was in Slovakia. It was all, they were Hungarian. And the language at home. So when we met for the reunion in Israel, Magda and her cousins spoke to each other in Hungarian.
No, I got you.
On that trip, Magda and Piri and Esther were the three sisters, three cousins. Piri and Esther were sisters.
The last names?
Oh, they had, I can't remember they were Israeli last names, the two sisters, because they got married in Israel. But they were Klein.
They were
We
Klein
Klein.
girls.
Okay.
They were
Who had
from the
married
Klein family. Magda's last name was Weiss. She was the one who was still living in Czechoslovakia. We went to Yad Vashem, which means the hand of the voice of God, and it's their Holocaust memorial. And I had been there many times, but never with someone who had been through
I've done it,
one
yeah.
of those camps. And so every time they saw one of these horrible pictures, they were sitting there going like this, and you could see the emotion. And then we got to this big diorama of Auschwitz, and they're pointing at the different rooms, and one of them turned to me in English, Esther spoke English, and said, that was Mengele's medical facility, we were in there. And it was just overwhelming.
I can't imagine. Yeah.
Really, you just can't imagine that kind of an experience for them to be doing. And afterwards, when we had a wonderful reunion, because there's some cousins and youngers they're actually back in the States, but they made Aliyah, and they owned a restaurant, Safari, that we went to. You all met them. You met them too, Brian, when we did that family trip to Israel.
Yeah.
And we went to that restaurant. It actually was in Tel Aviv.
They own the restaurant.
They owned
Yeah,
it.
yeah.
So Joseph and Klein was there.
They were
all.
clients.
We had a reunion at his house in Herzliya, so they were all there, and we called the two cousins who were in Australia, and they talked on the phone together. It was the first time they had all had this opportunity to communicate.
Since 45.
Yeah, since the war was over. And when we left the country, Magda gave us back all the pictures.
We flew with her back to Vienna.
We flew her back to Vienna. And she had to take time when she got there to buy a couple electrical appliances to take back to Czechoslovakia so that they would believe. Because the people who left and went into Austria went to buy things. And so she had to buy what she bought. So she bought them and gave her pictures that had been taken, because she was afraid that if she took them home, it was still the Iron Curtain for them, that she would get caught. So when we finally went there, many years later, after it became an open country, we took Aaron and Matthew and Victoria.
Aaliyah.
To meet them. We drove to Prešov, and we took her a whole stack of pictures. That
Yeah,
her with
pictures
her
back.
cousins.
Neat.
Yeah.
How old was that?
Sorry.
Don't
She
cry.
was in her
She's a
70s.
generation ahead of us.
Yeah, and she has since died. Her name is Nina Carson. She's kind of a family historian and keeps of the book. So when one of you kids are born, we send her the
You were in there.
information,
It's okay.
and she keeps it current.
I mean, the book is about this big.
Yeah.
Just name after name after name.
And she
Has
also
anyone
has it
put that
online.
book in digital?
She did.
She did.
She has it.
So I don't have, okay.
She has it online.
Is she still around?
And it,
Minna, yeah.
oh yeah, they're in our age group.
Because
She.
Yeah, we're gonna want her phone number.
I got the Brockman.
one of the things that Harold did to get
Harold Bean.
Weinberger, who was a generation above Mom Golbus, who was blind,
Okay.
he went to Prešov to look up for more information about the family, and he found the part of the town where the synagogue was, and he knocked on the door. The synagogue was closed. It had been closed forever since the Holocaust. It was just, they had somebody who was the, what do you call the guy who's the...
Caretaker.
Yeah. Yes, and this, he came out and said, it's closed, and the people who will take care of it are somewhere. A woman walks across the street. He stops her and says, I'm trying to find a family. I know I have family here in this town. And she said, who are you looking for? And he said, Magda Wisova. It was her daughter.
No.
She said, okay, I can take you to her. So they bumped into each other like that, one of these serendipitous things. And Susie took him to Magda's house, and that's how he met Magda the first time.
Right. That's how that branch all got in. The other one, the first time we went to Australia, we were going to Sydney. And so there's this cousin who came out who was ill in the Italian hospital, DP hospital, and then got on the boat and went to Australia. And
Rachel.
I found her in a book, and I wrote her and said, we're coming to Australia, and she lived in Sydney, and I'll call you. Love to see you. And as soon as we got there, the next morning, as it just so happens, they have a program, Good Morning Australia, like we have Good Morning America, and I was gonna be on the program. I was being interviewed on the program for something. And
Hold on.
she
Was this for way back when you did
Yeah.
the in vitro?
Yeah.
Come on, no, you get to brag. You get to explain this.
for some in utero surgery stuff that we had done. And it was about 15 minutes of pain. And she was a teacher, and she'd had a cold that day, so she'd stayed home. So she's watching Good Morning Australia, and she said she started shouting at the TV, "That's my cousin, that's my cousin." So she contacted us, and we got to meet her, and she took us to another cousin,
Eugene Klein.
Eugene Klein, who I hadn't actually known that was there. They're the two survivors who made it from that generation, who made it to Australia, and they've all made lives. The ones who made it to Israel, the ones who made it to Australia have all gotten married, had kids, had grandkids.
I don't think she had children, but Eugene had 2 sons. One of whom I was in touch with on Facebook, which is one of the reasons that Facebook was so great, and also we emailed a lot all the holidays. He recently died, but his brother married and has a child, at least one, that he was very proud of. And as far as I know, Eugene and Rachel are still good. They're still with us.
And we're taping this in February of 2017.
It's
So
March.
you can-
It's March.
Is
March,
it?
yeah, it is.
When did that happen?
It's halfway through
11
March.
days ago.
Oh, we're in March now of 2017. But it's
I'm
on
out
Good
of
Morning
it. Okay.
America.
He can only be funny once.
All right,
What
ready?
year was
Yes.
this?
I remember when
Early
he was
80s.
on Good Morning America with David Hartman,
Oh, that's
and
so
he's
funny.
showing him
1980.
ultrasounds, and he's saying, and here's the bladder that's too big, and David Hartman says, you can tell all that from this, and his comment was, it helps if you've seen one before.
This was really funny because David Hartman was really, he couldn't believe it. It blew his mind, and it was ordinary for us.
And he was
But we were with our friends that summer up in Sun River, Oregon, and they called
This Kathy,
and said, we'd like you to be on Good Morning America. And Mickey's going, I'm on vacation, I can't even talk to them. And Kathy said, you have to talk to them. You have to be, I can tell all my friends you're going to be on Good Morning America. And that's why he did it. He wasn't
turned
gonna
them
do
down.
it.
I turned them down.
I did turn it
I
down.
turned
She
them
said,
down.
call him back.
You said you wanted
Had,
more?
had Kathy hollering, you have to do this for your mother.
For your mother.
Your
That's
mother
right.
needs to.
I forgot. That is
And-
what she said.
They called back in the afternoon, and they said, we really want him to come. Kathy answered the phone. So Kathy answered the phone and said, he'll come.
He's coming.